It feels like every time someone brings up the best video games of all time, people tend to gravitate to the games of old. The Half-Lives, the StarCrafts, the original Deus Ex. But I think it's important we also realize just how good we have it nowadays too. For every older game like Mass Effect 1 that truly did do it better than its modern contemporaries, there are so many examples of older games that would fail under deeper scrutiny and a lack of nostalgia. Have you ever actually gone back and played your favorite games as a kid? Most of them weren't as good as you remember, or aren't as good as what we play now. Often, we fondly remember games of old not because they were better, but because our lives then were different. We were kids, we had more free time, and for some, they were happier. So today, let's take a look at 5 modern games, ones released in the last 5 years, that show that the gaming industry hasn't gotten worse, but rather, and contrary to popular opinion, even better. First up, let's talk about Arcane Studios' 2017 Prey. It's a game from not only my current favorite studio in the world, but also one that is extremely underrated. Because of the name, many gamers at the time found an early disdain. What was originally supposed to be a sequel to the highly acclaimed 2006 Prey game, shown off at E3 years before, had turned into something entirely different. And this new Prey turned out to be something truly great in its own right, though. You see, Prey is an immersive sim like many that came before, the likes of Deus Ex and Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines. But even more so than its predecessors, Prey is a perfection of the genre. The main campaign sends us forth on an abandoned space facility doing top secret research on alien organisms that have broken out and taken over the station. And so the player is set forth on a journey to discover what is really happening. And across many twists and turns, the game slowly gives us more and more ways to traverse the station. And that is the genius of Prey. Instead of being an amalgamation of many different linear levels, Prey is instead one massive interconnected space. This means the player will constantly be seeing similar areas, but as they unlock more devices, gadgets, and augmentations, the player character will then be able to go to new and previously undiscovered spaces. Each engagement in Prey is marked by its obsession with player agency. Whenever you sneak, hack, morph, or go in guns blazing, Prey allows the player to tackle all situations in any way they like. And it makes the game so engaging because unlike many other games, it is constantly asking the player to think for themselves and come up with interesting solutions all on their own. You can use the glue cannon as expected to freeze enemies in their spot, or over time you can discover that you can use it to build makeshift bridges to hard to reach spots. You can morph into coffee cups and squeeze into the weird hole in the wall you found before. You can shoot a dart onto a computer screen to turn the lights on. From the ground up, Prey is built to allow the player to solve puzzles in interesting and engaging ways, and builds upon amazing levels in older immersive sims to create a game that truly sits at the top of the genre. In fact, the Mooncrash DLC for the game is also likely one of the best DLCs for a game of all time. It completely flips the immersive sim genre on its head and forces players to go through a never-ending cycle on a moon base to uncover a secret conspiracy with multiple characters and playstyles. It takes what makes the immersive sim genre so great and just makes it better, by forcing the player to use new strategies because they have to choose which order to take not only their characters and abilities in, but also items. On one run, you may open a door with a hacker, only to then go into the same room and repair a portal device with the engineer on the next. Everything about Prey and Mooncrash is a love letter to the greats of old. And most surprisingly, it does just about everything better than those old games. But many people missed this masterpiece because of its rocky launch. If you go back and play the original Deus Ex or System Shock now, they feel very clunky. The UI is hard to manage, the AI will become very erratic at times, and there simply isn't as much variety in design or levels or ways to tackle them as Prey. Prey also actually fully expanded the genre with Mooncrash and reinvented the wheel in a wholly genius and fun way. In other words, Prey is the perfection of a genre that was so beloved many years ago, and it's a perfect example of how new games can be so great even when people are unwilling to give them the credit they deserve. Next up, another game I want to shine light on is the Witcher Thronebreaker. I'm actually not much of a card games guy, and in fact, I'm not even much of a Witcher guy, but Thronebreaker sucked me in regardless. Not only is Gwent, the card game you play in the game, extremely fun, but even more so, the story, characters, and consequences the game presents to the player, and how it intertwines it with the combat of the game is what makes it so great and elevates it above its predecessors. Many older RPGs like Fallout 1 and 2 do have lots of choices and consequences, but it just isn't done as well as Thronebreaker. In Thronebreaker, each decision you are met with in the story isn't black and white. Instead, every choice you make has far-reaching effects on the world, whether that be making your companions love or despise you, or the inhabitants in the world dying or prospering. In old games like Fallout's, a lot of the choices simply didn't have the same amount of actual consequence that we see in CDPR's writing. Systems like this in games have existed, but it is only in CDPR's commitment to great writing that it makes it work so well here. Every character, villain or foe, has a motive. They feel like real people, and because of this, every time you come to a crossroads in your journey, it is actually difficult to decide what to do, because it is actually a hard decision to make, just like it would be in real life. In many other games, decisions kind of feel like a funhouse. In Fallout, for example, even New Vegas, a lot of the time the choices you make in the game are fun and have impact, but they feel much less mature and real. It's hard to truly explain in words, but Thronebreaker makes your choices feel like they have more weight. In other games, I feel like I am just role-playing and choosing the most interesting or funny option to see what happens. But in Thronebreaker, I actually care, because I care about the characters and what will happen to them in this world that is so well written it feels real. Both are fun, but Thronebreaker is much more impactful. And not only this, but Thronebreaker also does what so many older RPGs failed to do as well. It intrinsically ties the choices and consequences to the gameplay. In many other RPGs, your choices affect which characters die, or who takes over as the new leader of the castle. But it is much more rare that choices fundamentally change the game itself and how you play. In Thronebreaker, if you betray your companion, not only do they leave your party, and thus also your dialogue moments, but also you lose their champion card for use in battle. And sometimes, depending on your playstyle, these cards have to be the crux of your strategy, a card with a powerful augmentation that made your whole deck work. So not only do your decisions have an effect on the story, but also how your troops will think of you, whether you will have enough money to pay them, and which cards you will have in your deck, which all in turn drastically affects how you play the game from a gameplay standpoint as well as a story one. If anything, Thronebreaker shows just how much better writing and game design has gotten in recent years compared to many of the greats of old. Speaking of game design, another game we have to take a look at is Titanfall 2. You see, I grew up playing and loving games like Modern Warfare 2 and Battlefield Bad Company 2, but I have to be honest, Titanfall 2 is just better. I still remember fondly missions from my childhood, like All Gillied Up and No Russian, but Titanfall 2 missions not only blow them out of the water, but also are much, much more consistent. Instead of every other mission being a filler corridor shooter that sends endless waves of enemies, Titanfall 2 has carefully crafted each and every environment for maximum fun. The campaign is extremely short, but that's actually a good thing. No needless filler, no boring missions, every single moment in Titanfall 2 is what it sets out to be at all times. Fun as fuck. When I go back and play Call of Duty, Battlefield, Medal of Honor, I'm reminded of how great these games were, but also of how much worse they are than many of the greats of today. I'll never forget storming the beaches of Normandy for the first time in my first Call of Duty game. But traveling in and through time on the fly in Titanfall 2 is just better. I may remember my moments with other games more, but only because I was a kid. The kids today who grew up playing Titanfall 2 are playing a game with tighter controls, much better and more fun movement, much more variety in mechanics, and added extra features like mechs. If you wish we were in the good old days, like when you used to play Call of Duty and Battlefield, maybe what you really wish is that you were a kid again. Because the story of Titanfall 2, the gameplay, and the variety that it takes on throughout the entire campaign is truly a step above of the games that these same creators made so many years ago. And while that doesn't take away from these older games being great, it does just go to show how blinded many people are by their nostalgia. If you haven't played Titanfall 2, go play it right now and tell me that it isn't better than Modern Warfare 2 and the games you loved as a child. Another modern game I think truly shows just how great gaming is nowadays is the recently released It Takes Two from Hazelight Studios. I grew up playing and loving co-op games like Portal 2 and Left 4 Dead. In fact, if I had to choose my fondest gaming memories, it would probably be from those times I spent gaming with friends. And out of all of these experiences, I honestly do think It Takes Two is just the best. Because It Takes Two does more than any other co-op game I have played. It's fully and completely built from the ground up with your team in mind. You can only see your partner's screens at all times, regardless of whether you're in the same room. All puzzles require that you work together, and each party does their part. And most importantly, what separates this game from its predecessors is that it just has so much variety. In other co-op games, we do the same things over and over. We fight a boss in Diablo and Borderlands and get new loot. We shoot portals in Portal, and we decimate zombies in Left 4 Dead. But It Takes Two never overstays its welcome. Each zone is entirely different. You are constantly unlocking new mechanics, and the game itself is so constantly switching genres, it's almost hard to tell what the game even is. And because of this, It Takes Two is the first co-op game my non-gamer friends have loved. The game is fully focused on having fun, and also a heartwarming tale and story the whole way through, all while looking like a live-action Pixar movie. Maybe more than any other game, this is the game that showed me that games nowadays really just are amazing, and I think it's so degrading to say that older games are just better and that the industry has lost its way. The graphics and art design are reaching movie quality. The stories are more mature and well written on average, and the risks we are taking with gameplay and game design result in truly new and fun experiences, the likes of which we have never seen before. It Takes Two was the first co-op game I played where it would only work in co-op, and everything about the game is better because of it. It's easy to trash modern games and how they don't take any risks and aren't accomplishing amazing feats. But there are so many amazing modern games that do have these qualities that people are simply ignoring. If you grew up and loved Portal 2, or loved Left 4 Dead, or Borderlands, then there's games nowadays that are just as, if not more great. But you just aren't realizing that. Or you simply don't like games as much anymore. The final game I wanted to take a look at is a controversial one, Cyberpunk 2077. It's a game I've done multiple videos on recently, and for good reason. And also a game that, like I've said, has its fair share of controversy. But the funniest thing about the whole ordeal is that under all the hate and vitriol, under all the disdain, is an actually amazing game. Cyberpunk is a game from a developer not only rich and powerful, but also one willing to take a risk on a genre many others haven't before. It's a game that lacks many features that so many were hoping for, while also at its core having an amazing story, characters, and gameplay. And more than anything, it has shown just how far open-world adventure games, and really game technology as a whole, has come. While the AI is extremely questionable at best, the actual world, the design, the sounds, the visuals, and the overall presentation is beyond anything we have seen before. As a kid, this is exactly what I always imagined games of the future being. Worlds where the city actually felt huge, where the skyscrapers reached into the sky, and where the characters made me feel real emotions. It's a perfect example of how gamers treat modern games today. If you only read the comments online, you would think this game was horrible, that it had no redeeming factors. But while Cyberpunk does have its problems, the core of what makes any game great, really any great art, is there. There's a soul and heart to this game that so many miss. And while the general public is quick to talk about how much they love and care about the games of old, it's hard for the same group to realize that all that is still there in the modern games of today as well. Slower moments talking with Johnny Silverhand, or conversing with Panam and Judy. Moments like these are better than any RPG I have played before. Yes, even my favorite trilogy of all time, Mass Effect. As technology has progressed, facial animations have improved, character models look and move more realistically, and the eyes, the window to the soul, now shows real emotion. But even more than the writing and storytelling has improved. When I objectively go back and play my favorite RPGs as a kid, I'm thinking of Oblivion, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, SWTOR, and Fallout, I can't help but shake the feeling that I like these games more because I was a kid. I didn't have work or a family or responsibility to care about. I could truly get lost in these worlds. But the same things that made me love these games are here today, and if I'm being completely honest, it's even better. You see, it's easy to look back warmly on our past, to remember our childhoods as better in some way, more simple and less chaotic, and in turn to call the games of our past better. I often hear the argument that games aren't as good as they used to be, and I couldn't disagree more. There's more talent, passion, and drive in this theater than there ever has been, and with that, there does come some downsides. But for every studio that sells its soul and screws its customers, there are so many more that are creating masterpieces you haven't played or refuse to acknowledge, like those in your childhood. At least for me. If you don't like games as much anymore, that's because you changed, not because games got worse. There are so many great and amazing new and modern games out there, tons that I didn't even mention on this list, and ones that are just better than what came before. It's just you grew up. The core of what makes great art is still all there, and this time with more technology and manpower than ever before. So instead of hating on what makes the games industry so bad and what it has become, I think it's finally time the community acknowledges it for the greatness it has also achieved recently. I constantly hear so much negativity about the gaming industry, about where games are and where they're headed, and I just wish there were more loud voices to counter this. Because games today are better than they have ever been, in my opinion. More and more people are playing, and there's more variety and higher quality than ever. So next time you complain about how far gaming has fallen, about the problems with microtransactions and companies just trying to make their next bag, ask yourself, are the games actually worse, or are you?